Okay, welcome back, future mathematicians. What we're going to do today is start talking about quadratics. So this is going to be the intro to quadratics. What we're going to do is start looking at this function, which should look pretty familiar to us. Maybe sans this first number up here. What we're going to do is talk about some critical points and some new features that we haven't quite looked at yet. Okay, so let's first off talk about what we already know, right? First things first. If we were to sketch something like this, if we graph something like this, roughly speaking, we're looking at something that has to be moved over. Let's see. This is a -1, so we're going to move it right. We're going to move it right 1. This is a +1, and it's in the outside of our parent function here, so we're going to move it up 1. So 1 over, 1 up, we'll put a little dot for our vertex right there. And from this 3, if you remember from when we were first starting translations and reflections, we talked about it a little bit, not too much. So it's going to be a thinner graph. It's going to be a quadratic, but it's going to be a little bit thinner here than normal. Okay, and that's a little bit thinner than normal. It should be a little bit more probably, but that's okay. We'll do it. We'll talk about the graphing later. So first things first. Let's talk about, has anything changed? No, not really. It's still quadratic, right? We're still translating things using these two numbers, and we're trying to predict things with what we already know. Okay. What I want to add to it is a few things. So what we're going to talk about is the 1, the vertex, 2, the axis of symmetry, X-Intercept, Y-Intercept, domain and range. And to some point we already talked about this, but we'll continue on to reinforce that information, okay, just in case some of us are still kind of trying to catch up. Okay, so the vertex, 1, we could look at where it is. 2, some of us have already figured out that this kind of tells us where the vertex is because all of the parent functions start from the 0, 0 point, the origin, right? So the vertex in this case is going to be at 1. Oops. The vertex is going to be at 1, 1. Okay? It's going to be right there. Next, we're going to talk about the axis of symmetry. Well, the axis of symmetry is a line, right? Or the point at which this graph looks like it's reflected. So in this case, it's going to be a line like that, usually denoted by the dashed line. And in this case, the axis of symmetry is x equals +1. Okay? Next, the x-intercept. So that's going to be a little bit harder. Oh, no, it's not. Just kidding. X-intercept. We look at the graph, right? How many times does this graph cross the x-axis? Well, none, right? So in this case, I'm going to have none. Okay. So at this point, I feel like midway through the video, hopefully, I want you guys to go ahead and pause the video real quick and draw a cat in the corner. Doesn't have to be a good cat, just a cat over your page number. Okay, and don't tell anybody about this. If they're not listening, then that's their fault. So you'll see them coming up to the ring of fire and be sent immediately away. All right, so once you're done with that, go ahead and unpause it and we'll continue on. So next we're going to talk about the Y-intercepts, right? So the Y-intercepts are going to be right there. Okay, and we may or may not know how to find this, but let me show you how, just in case we forgot. Y-intercepts in this case, I want x to be 0, right? Anywhere along this line, this graph, the value of x is going to be 0, right? So I want f of, let me see if I can get it here, 0. So I plug in 3, 0 minus 1 squared plus 2. And again, I just inputted a 0 into our function here, or substituted in, however you want to put it. Next, okay, so this is 3, this is -1 squared plus 1. 1, I'm going to do it slowly. 1 squared is going to be, or negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1, which is 1. Right? 3 times 1 is going to be 3 plus 1. Ah, that is nice. So our x-intercept, or sorry, excuse me, y-intercept is that y is equal to 4, also denoted as 0, 4 for some of us. Okay, domain we should already know. Domain in this case we go negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. This graph goes all the way to the negative direction, right? If we're walking along the graph, we can always find an x value up into infinity, right? Or we could always find a y value also to infinity. So it's going to be going to negative infinity, comma, positive infinity, right? And finally, the range. Range, let's take a look. How many y values do I have? Well, in the positive direction, I have infinity in the positive direction. And going the opposite direction, what's the lowest y value I have? Well, the lowest y value I have, if I follow along my graph, is going to be 1. So I'm just going to put a 1. And that 1 is included, so I'm going to put square brackets. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Again, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and check out those plus videos, and then and any pro tip videos I have. So that'll conclude Intro to Quadratics. Thanks.